Okay.
Okay.
My hand gets tired. I may just put you on voice a little bit.
That's fine.
I'm holding.
Congratulations on your retirement, Ms. Deborah.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
I've been really busy, so I haven't retired much.
Well, I hope everybody is staying warm. I do have to say, moving from the north, where I had been for 36 years of my life, coming down to Houston, it's very weird seeing them talk about snow as a catastrophic event, because for us it was a normal Tuesday. So this is odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
definitely stay off the roads even if you know how to drive, because
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we don't really sand here or salt. So
I know. It's like,
You
I
don't have
lived in
any
Boston.
snow
Yeah. I know how to drive in the snow, but I don't have the right tires, and no one else knows how to drive in the snow.
that's what I worry about.
Western Oregon at the moment is paralyzed. They either have freezing rain, much as parts of Texas do, or they've got snow on the ground, and people on that side of the mountain cannot drive in the snow. They just don't get enough of it. And so it's a mess, I guess.
Oh, I can't even imagine. There was a really bad pileup in Dallas-Fort Worth area because of ice. So
Saw that.
everybody stay off the roads if they can. All right, it's 1:05, so I'm going to go ahead and get us all started. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to thank so much for Rosemarie Philip to come in and do this talk with us. So this is actually going to be a conversation on self-love and self-care with Rosemarie Philip there. And she is a professional certified coach and a warrior. She provides warrior tools, group coaching, and a safe community to thrive, not survive chronic illness, thrive. And I love that. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to let Rosemarie get started. And if anybody has any questions while she's speaking, feel free to message them to me. And if you want them private, or you can message them to everyone if you don't want them private. And I'll go ahead and insert those questions towards the end.
Fantastic. And definitely interrupt me at any point in time. I really do want this to be a chat, because I think that self-love is a topic that we don't talk about enough, especially in the endo space. And I think there's a lot of fear around it. And I see some nodding heads already. A lot of fear and even sometimes shame is attached to that. And it's easy for some people, it seems, and extremely hard for others, right? And there's no right or wrong with that. And that can also be determined by different parts of your journey that you're on with your illness or anything else that's going on in your life. So there were absolutely, points in my life where self-love was at a high, and other parts where self-love was below the the deepest of the low. And so it's, I hope, as we chat through today, really trying to understand, what is it and what does it really mean to me, to you, because it's going to be completely different for every single person. And so I just wanted to start off with a quick activity where I'll need everyone to come off mute for a moment. But I'm going to ask you to, when I say self-love, what is the very first word that comes to your mind?
Compassion.
Very first word.
Acceptance.
Challenging.
I'm going to say a phrase, I don't know, as in I don't know how to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I draw a blank. Like, I don't know what the first word that comes in. It's like nothing.
Same.
Mine's peace.
Any other ones? So we've said compassion, acceptance, challenging, I don't know how, a couple that said blank, peace. Any other ones we want to add to that that just kind of came from your gut when I said self-love?
I think compassion came to me as well, but kind of along with that, patience.
Mm.
It's something I don't think I have for myself that I have for others, right?
Yeah, that's such a great point. Because how we love ourselves is how we teach others to love ourselves. And so if we're not patient with ourselves and know what self-love actually means for us, how can we communicate to others what love means to us?
I think forgiveness also.
Ooh, forgiveness.
Yeah, because, you've got to forgive yourself for the things that you do or have done and quit blaming yourself.
Yeah, I think forgiveness for being less than perfect.
Right.
That what this disease does to us in terms of the quality of our lives and our ability to participate in life with our family and friends and partners, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, if we want to go back to our last talk with Melissa Velasco, giving yourself grace is something that she brought up in terms of like talking about setting New Year's resolutions or managing our expectations around New Year's resolutions. And I think that maybe giving yourself grace is a really important piece when we're talking about self-care and self-love as well.
I was going to say that too, Grace, for sure.
I'm writing all of these down because we're going to come with this. So those were the first words that came to mind. Like that's our gut, right? And what I always love doing that because it kind of sets the foundation from like where this group is at and how much it resonates across. Like I saw so many head nods as we brought up every single one of these. And when I look at this list, there's some that come from very much a place of joy. And there's also so many that come from a place of pain, of wound, of needing to heal, which is so much of the illness that we face every single day. It's got a mixture of all of that. So now that we kind of like level set, like where that gut is, how would you actually define self-love? And if any of you were following me on Instagram, I actually did this question in my stories. And so I'll share some of those definitions that other warriors had brought up. But I want to ask this group today, how would you actually define self-love? What does it look like, feel like, taste like?
Taking care of your own needs.
setting aside time for myself.
Setting boundaries for myself.
Thing that comes to mind to me is like permission to be wherever you are in the moment, rather than what other kinds of expectations might be out there.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think accepting myself.
How else would you define self-love?
I think it's like many factors, but showing up for yourself like you do for others. For me, it's also, you know, eating with a purpose to like make myself feel the best, you know, taking time. It's a lot of different.
Mhm.
So we're hearing some similarities
Mhm.
from our foundation. And it can be different for everyone. Why do you think that is? Why do you think self-love can be defined so differently between people?
I think it has a lot to do with getting your own personal needs met. So it's going to vary based on, you know, what each person prioritizes, where each person is at in their life, and what they struggle with as well.
Are you trying to say something?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I was thinking like where they are in their disease. Is it the beginning when they just got diagnosed? Is it where they're just wondering what's wrong with me and they still haven't heard of endometriosis? I think where you are in this process of diagnosis and treatment.
I think certainly, to piggyback Melissa, it's about your journey. I think everyone has a different journey when dealing with endometriosis. Our support system certainly impacts that as well, because I think I've been you're going to hear this over and over again from me. I've been very lucky for having a very strong support network, from my parents to my brother to my friends, my husband. And so I think my definition of self-love is going to be vastly different from someone who has no support, or, you know, because this endometriosis is so taxing as it is on a physical level, and your support system is very, very important. Your support system could be connecting with people online, and that's why support groups are so important, especially during a pandemic. Or, you know, yeah, I think that's where it's different for all of us. That's how it's defined for me, at least.
Yeah, we all have such different experiences. And I love that you brought up the support system, because that can make a major difference. I know, looking back at my journey, I also was very fortunate that I had some people close to me that were my biggest advocates. But there were also times that, because I didn't love myself enough, I pushed those people away and only let in the people who weren't supportive. And I like did the opposite. It was like I was almost self-sabotaging. When I look back at that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I completely like sabotaged my own experience, my own support system, because I didn't see that in myself. I didn't see that at the time at all. It's only from looking back. So I think it can, sometimes people are there for us, but if we don't have enough in us, or don't know enough about what self-love really means to us, so we can't communicate what we actually need. And I'm seeing a lot of heads nod there too. And that's why I wanted to ask you in the beginning is like, what are the things that come to mind when you think of self-love? Because if that's one thing that all of us can walk away with today is a solid understanding of what I personally, like each person in this room, feels as an element of self-love for you, then I think that's an amazing conversation, because the more that we can dig into that ourselves, the more we can share that with the people that we trust, who are safe to share that with too, because I think that's another element in that community of support, is who are the people that are safe enough to share those things with, to be vulnerable enough with, to share how and what that love, needs to look like. And that's why self-love is so important, because we have to understand that ourselves in order to be able to help others to be able to support us, if that makes sense. And please shout out with questions throughout. I really do want this to be a dialogue. And so when we're thinking about, oh, sorry, did someone?
No, I wanted to add it, and sometimes we just feel like we deserve that sort of support. Mm-hmm. Going back to that sabotaging ourselves, because when you just believe that that's what you deserve.
Mm-hmm. I think that when you have a chronic illness like endometriosis, it's really easy to see yourself as broken, as something that's not worthy, as something to see yourself as your own enemy. And it can feel hard to accept support or love or compliments or anything that sort of comes up against that view of yourself as this broken thing that's, your body is betraying you.
Yeah, along the same lines as that, I feel like it also depends on how you grew up and what you learned about what to value. So, if you've learned to be self-sufficient and independent and, rely on yourself and be, I forget who it was, somebody posted something about being a helper and then trying to set boundaries and ask for things you need. I think that's part, at least for me, that's definitely part of it, because I was diagnosed until I was 32. So that whole time I had that inner narrative of being self-sufficient and independent. But then, right, once your body starts to need more help from other people, that's a really hard internal battle to kind of switch from that feeling sometimes stubbornly independent and then accepting. And I think that's why for me, self-love, such a big part of it is acceptance. But yeah, I don't know.
And I think going along with that is, for some of us, it is such a big change from being, I was a super high achiever, very self-sufficient, and then I wasn't. I couldn't do anything. I felt debilitated. So going from I can do it myself, I can take care of myself too, well, now I can't, is a really hard place to be. And I think that it's just, it goes along with what you're saying, Lori.
Losing your sense of identity.
Mm-hmm.
When the disease is bringing on things that are so opposite to what our inner personality may be, our inner values might be. It's that just constant conflict. So then as it keeps like gnawing at you, right? Like that's kind of like what I feel like is, you know, there are times where it's just like constantly etching away at who you are. It makes it harder because you start like de-identifying yourself, which then makes it harder for us to identify what self-love really looks like, and what we need, just because of the very essence of the disease itself.
That made me think of, how would I have identified self-love when I was, you know, however many years ago? What would I have done? I would have taken myself shopping for a while. Hard to do right now. I would have, you know, done so many things differently for myself then. And it's like, it is a whole new identity. What I used to be able to do to show myself self-love is really different than what I can do now to show myself self-love. Kind of like, I used to actually take myself on, you know, dates, like solo dates, you know, which I needed. That was what I needed back then. And to change what I could do then for myself is different than, you know, what I need to find I can do for myself now. And what's more important to me now may be different than, you know, what was important to me back then.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Holly, is, you know, what used to work for us before doesn't necessarily work for us now. And it all ties to that aspect of that identity and like who we thought ourselves to be. And that's why, like, I like to start with my clients. I like to start with like a values exercise, because it really kind of brings us back to what is our core, even before the illness. Like, what is our core, and how can that still come to be, illness and all? Because then it kind of like slowly brings you back to that aspect of self-love. So what are some of the things that you're doing right now? I know some of you shared that, I don't know how to self-love. So what are some of the things that have worked really well for you guys? I'd love to hear.
Well, I did a very big thing for self-love for myself this past month. I quit my very, very demanding job for a much better stay-at-home job that's 9 to 5 and gives me insurance. And so I can go see now an endo-excision specialist and actually be able to afford it. So that was a very big deal for me.
That's amazing. It is amazing.
So that was, now I just got to learn the rest.
That's a huge step. It's not just a baby step there.
Everybody who knows me knows that took years for me to do. But I just had to do it. And I think instantly everybody could tell I'm happier and I have more energy. So.
And what switched for you? Like, what was it that made you make that decision that I need to do this for me?
Well, part of it was therapy, and really talking that out with my therapist. Part of that was realizing what my mental issues were, that almost a lot of them developed because of the endometriosis. And so finally having the talks, finally being on the right medication to help certain things, it was like a light turned on. And so that first step was going to the therapist, which was a big step for me too.
Thank you for sharing that, because I know that, like, it's still a taboo topic.
Yes.
even within our own community, even though I can guarantee a majority of our community has attempted to or called a hotline or has, reached out for that type of support in some way, shape, or form. And so thank you for being so open about that. And it's amazing that you did that for yourself. I love that.
Thank you.
I love, yeah. But it was important. It was an important part for it. That was an act of self-love, right? Going to a therapist.
Yes.
To be able to actually then dig through some of the things to, to find what would in essence then now transformed into your looking for a different role that will give you the care that you need, both emotionally, it sounds like, and physically.
Yes. And I think that we don't think of therapy as self-love, but it really is. It's, we always think that you go to therapy because you're damaged, but that's not true. We're all have so much going on, and therapy just helps you sort through it and handle everything so much better. The pain that you're in, the work that you need to do, the overwhelming emotions. And frankly, I'm one of those people that I'm like, man, everybody should go to therapy. Awesome.
And it doesn't mean it's thoroughly enjoyable every time, right?
No, it's not. It's actually it can be really hard work.
Yeah.
No kidding. Looking at issues can be very painful. I've used therapy a number of times in my life, and it always pushes me to a higher level, but it's like climbing mountains sometimes. I mean, It's hard work, very hard work, and sometimes the therapist identifies things you really don't want to deal with, but you're not going anywhere until you do that. So,
Yep.
But I think one of the things that you said that I think is really important is that for you, it opened up clarity. What do I need to do for me? And so then you have, out of that, set a plan and started making some steps toward what's important to you, where before maybe you were being held back for some reason. At least that's the kind of thing that I found for me, is that something was really obstructing my journey, and I saw it as an immovable object until a therapist pointed out, is it really, or you just don't want to go there?
That is so true.
And usually it's, that's a bear that's crossing the path on the summit. I'm good. I'll back away for a minute. But then there's times where you're like, all right, I got this. I'm going to just wait for the bear to pass, and then I will move through. And sometimes it's back to what Maria was saying of having that community of support too. If you have, sometimes for some things that you dig through with a therapist, you do need some others, that are close to you for some of that support as you walk through some of those things. And sometimes the therapist is all you need, to work through those things too. And it's just having the courage enough to then step into that when you're ready. What are some other things that you guys are doing for self-love?
I'll share. I also seek therapy on every 2 weeks. It first started during the pandemic because there was a lot going on, right? And I also have a child, and I struggle with this one because my son's going to be 6. He does virtual learning. He's an only child. And we all know that at this age, they really need to be in a social setting, right, to help them learn about social skills and to interact with their peers and stuff like that. So I struggle with that probably on a daily basis, whether I'm doing the right thing or not. And my therapist really helped me help me recognize that what I'm doing is what I think is best for me, for my family, and for my child. And also, you know, and she'll ask me, what have you done that makes you like, what have you done this week? Not ask me anything else. And I just give her a rundown. And a lot of the times I talk about the foundation because that's something I'm very proud of. And she'll remind me, you've done something good, you know, give yourself a break. So she helps me recognize to give myself some grace, and also just doing little things for myself, which is taking a hot shower for like 10 minutes. I usually, people with kids understand this, like sometimes you just don't have that time. And I started wearing lipstick because I loved makeup before. And when I got sick, I just stopped wearing makeup. And so she kind of just gave me this exercise, like, just do something small, like just wear lipstick. And that's my dog, sorry. Yeah, and that's something I've done for myself, is just wear lipstick to my virtual work and put on, and I'll do a mask once a week, a beauty mask. And that's how I practice, something very small, because that's all I can handle right now. But I like it. It makes me feel good.
I like that you mentioned that you set a boundary of what I can handle. Because like sometimes, so some of the things that we've brought up is we've brought up some internal aspects of self-love, right? That's like hard work. And then there's also some aspects that you brought up that are some of those internal lifts, you know, like the lipstick, or being able to take a hot shower for 10 minutes, you know, those types of things that help lift the spirit or give you some peace or safety, right? But we need a balance of both, because like, if you don't do the work, you're not going to do these other things, right? But sometimes you can do too much work and it's exhausting, and you need to do more of these other things too, and give yourself that grace, like we talked about earlier. You know, it really is. I mean, sometimes the balance scale is like this, right? But it's just acknowledging, when do I need, okay, I need to actually face the bear that's on the trail. And what are the times that instead I need to just take a break for a moment and just do enjoyable things and not do work. Because our illness is work. So we have to be a little more patient with ourselves in that category. What other things do you guys do for self-love?
One thing that I started a little under a year ago was taking selfies, because I feel invisible in the family so often, because, you know, whether it's because I have to step out and rest while the rest of my family is doing a big project, or, you know, even if it's the days where I'm trying to join the family, but I'm on the ground resting while they're doing an activity. But I'm always the photo taker too. And so I'm always capturing the pictures of my family, and they don't do the same for me. And so looking through photos of activities, I've realized I feel invisible because there are no pictures of me. And being overweight, I don't always want pictures of me taken, or not feeling well, I don't always want pictures taken. And so over the last year, I started taking pictures if I'm laying in bed, and taking a wacky picture with my stuffed animals, or, you know, just I always took pictures for myself, but I started turning the camera around to say, you know what, I am here, even if it's just for myself to see and to look back on, hey, you know what, that was a hard day, but I made it through it. And so that's been something for me. 2 years before that, I started slowly commenting on other people's posts on Instagram and things, because I feel like I didn't have a voice. And I just started gently, very gently with myself, trying to comment on people's posts. And then I get a little bit of feedback, and it just I mean, there were times it would just bring me to tears, knowing that someone heard my voice.
So that someone recognized your input was really powerful for you.
Yeah.
And what a radical act of self-love, Holly. Truly. That's amazing. I love that you were able to find ways to make your voice heard.
Hi, can I speak?
Of course, Julie.
I'm new here. I'm Julie, and I actually want to. Hi, Allison. I'm taking a really big step. I can't even talk. I'm so nervous. My first time here. So, hi everybody. It's really, really, really supportive to see that there's so many other ladies going through the same things. I've decided to go with a hysterectomy, so I've been like a total wreck lately. I can tell you today, coming in here on Zoom is an act of self-love for me, and that's all I wanted to say. And I'm learning all these ideas because I don't do them. And my mom would say, you always do things for yourself last, because I have 2 kids, a husband, and my family. I always think about them first, put myself last. But if your body's telling you put yourself first, you're kind of like, well, you know, I have to take some painkiller before I help you with your homework, or I have to take a nap before I can even go downstairs. I'm on stage 4, so I'm actually in a lot of pain right now. You can probably hear my voice, but I really, really, really wanted to come on here. I just made that decision. So coming on here was the biggest step, and my husband can tell you that I am so private. I don't talk to anybody about it. I'm an executive, I'm a small business owner, and everything is just private. So this is a huge step, and I'm very, very happy to hear all of your ideas, and thank you so much. Thank you.
What a celebration. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And we hope we get to see your face every month, because they host stuff every single month. Which is
So it's
amazing.
every month? Okay, that's really nice, because this is really helpful. Thank you.
And there's a few communities, and I'll talk about that a little bit at the very end as well. There's some other spaces too. So there's a lot of variety. Like, it's finding what works for us, right? Because we're all different. And like I shared, there were parts of my journey where I was at the lowest low. And if I were in communities that were all sharing their pain, I wouldn't have done well. And then there were other times where that's what I needed. I needed to share my pain with others. And so finding those spaces for you and what works for you is a really great act of self-love. And so glad that you're here, Julie. So thank you. Not only just for showing up, but also actually speaking up too. That's amazing. Camera on too. Anyone else want to share some acts of self-love?
I'll share.
Oh,
Oh,
no, go
ahead,
ahead,
Lori.
You go.
Okay. So, sorry, I logged on a little late, so I don't know if someone already talked about this, but I think for me, the biggest step that I started taking towards self-love was to actually actively stop hating myself. And I think for so long, I didn't even realize that I just really hated myself. I hated the person that I was. I hated the way that I looked. I hated the way that I acted. And, you know, I wasn't even aware of that. But as I became more aware of my actual self-talk and all of the judgments that I passed on myself, I realized that, you know, everything that I was saying, all of my internal dialogue all the time was, God, Amy, you're so stupid. Like, if I would make a mistake, I would immediately call myself stupid and berate myself and judge myself. And why don't you do things better? And I would keep looking back at the past and wondering why I didn't act better and why, you know, I wasn't just better in every way. And so I think for me in order to be able to have any inkling of what is self-love, first I had to actually stop like self-loathing, I think was the biggest step for me. And once I was able to just really be more gentle with myself and be more compassionate, and if I made a mistake, like in a moment of brain fog, I put my keys down, and then later I had to rush out and I couldn't find my keys, and instead of saying like, you're so stupid, why don't you put them in the same spot, to just say to myself, like, it's okay, you're suffering. Sorry, my cat's needy. You're suffering, you know, and you're doing your best, and just taking that step back and just recognize that I'm an imperfect, messy human being, and that all of us are that. And sometimes on the outside we may look really put together or not, you know, but in the inside, I think there's moments in our lives that all of us can say that we're struggling and we're trying our best. And so I think that just really helped me a lot, was to stop being so critical of myself.
What were some tools you used, Amy, to help shift from that? Once you recognized I have to stop self-loathing in order to be able to even start the journey of self-love, what were some things, if you don't mind sharing, that were helpful for you?
You know, to be honest, I really don't know. I feel like I can't pinpoint anything. I kind of started this around several years ago, but I think at the time I was really doing like a lot of cognitive therapy, a lot of meditation, where I was just kind of just learning to take a step back. And, you know, I think a lot of times when we're thinking, we don't even realize that we're thinking. We're just like in the thought. And I think I've gotten better at seeing the thoughts as kind of like separate from me, you know? So it's not like when I'm thinking, I'm like seeing words in the sky or anything, but I'm just like gotten better at, in that, you know, knee-jerk reaction where I'm like, God, Amy, you're so stupid. And then like catching myself. And I think that just takes practice. It just takes practice to catch when you're ruminating, or catch when you're judging yourself or jumping to conclusions, things like that. And then in that moment, taking a step back, I think, and just going, oh, I just called myself stupid again. And I think they're just little incremental steps. It's not like you immediately, I was like, oh, I called myself stupid. Why did I do that? I'm actually really smart. Like it was a really gradual, I think that took many months of first just recognizing, oh, I'm doing that bad self-talk again. And then saying, how can I change that? And then, you know, in that moment when I called myself stupid, saying, like getting to the point where I could say, it's okay that you did that, or it's okay that that happened. You're not stupid. And so just slowly like withering away, you know, like the negative self-talk, and bringing in better self-talk. And I think that process probably took me like at least a year or more. And it's something that I'm still working on, but definitely just being more aware of, you know, being mindful and being really intentional in the way that I talk to myself. Something else that I really did was I tend to ruminate a lot. And so then I would sing, I used to teach kindergarten. And so then I would sing, like if I was ruminating about how stupid or some mistake I made, I would just start singing like The Wheels on the Bus Go Round and Round, which is the most annoying song ever. But like I found that when I was singing about the wheels on the bus for like 2 hours straight, no joke, I wasn't thinking about how stupid I was. And so it was just like these little tools to distract my mind and then like bring in, just better ways to talk to myself. And I think also asking people around me, like sometimes we have self-perceptions about how we're a burden or how we're stupid or how we're annoying. And then you ask your loved one and you're like, oh, that situation that happened 3 days ago, like I felt really annoying. Like what did, and they're like, you're fine. And so I think sometimes we make these huge mountains out of the tiniest things. And that might be because, you know, we're sick and we're in pain, and just like I personally can be a lot more sensitive when I'm like not feeling well. And so then I make up all these stories in my head. And then when I actually talk to my friend that I thought we had gotten in a fight, and she's like, we didn't get in a fight. I didn't call you back because I was driving, you know? So it's like, I made up all these stories. So it's just communicating better with the people that is important to me, instead of kind of wallowing in what I think is happening, and just flat out saying like, I feel like a burden right now. Am I being a burden? Can you tell me if I'm a burden? And they're like, you're not a burden, calm down. So I think that's really helped as well.
I love that. I love all of these suggestions, like the reframing and the self-talk and all of that. And the part that really caught me was the stories that we tell ourselves. Because like when I think about it, we're told so many stories about ourselves, like just with our disease, right? Like there's so much misinformation out there. That's why we have Nancy, right? To help us have the correct information. And we're told so many stories by other people on top of the stories we're already telling ourselves. And it compounds that. And so being able to, we can't control the stories that are being told outside, external of us, right? But we can actually control the ones that are inside. And so any way that we can identify those, and Amy, I love that you shared that, like, it was like a year-long process and it's still not over, right? But it was a year-long process to really like pay attention to it and build awareness around it. But those stories are powerful. And one tool that I use quite often is when I notice that I'm telling a story in my head about how I feel or what I'm perceiving that I'm doing, I ask myself, is that fact or is that a belief? And a fact is something that, I mean, it's very cut and dry, black and white, can't be based off of perception, can't be based off of feeling, can't be based on, right? Is it a fact or is it a belief? If it's a belief, then it's something I can question. I can then dig into, where did that come from? That's when I would ask a significant other or a friend, like, or like, those types of things. But that's a tool that's helped me like call out some of those things. Because if we see it, if we tell a story in our head and it's not a fact, then it is something that you can either explore with your therapist or explore with a partner or explore internally, as to what is the truth about it. And it might be true for you, right? But I think that helps me then determine like what's actually fact and what's actually something that could potentially be fiction.
I think one of the things that she did was really powerful was, checking out what the assumption was.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you angry at me? I'm not angry with you. I was driving the car. That's why I didn't call you back. One of the things that I've noticed is that assumptions fall into the void. So that if you don't really know, and you're just assuming, wow, I must have made that person angry, or gee, that person is not being very nice to me. Sometimes you need to check that out. Sometimes it's true, but at least you know for sure. But the void is a dangerous place to hang out because you can create all kinds of scenarios in your mind about how awful things are.
Yeah. And that works from the perspective too of if we're not checking assumptions of others, then they're making assumptions about us too. If we're not sharing that, if we're just trying to hide the pain 24/7 and we're not sharing what it feels like, how it affects us, and those types of things, then the other person could make an assumption about us that we're just always late, or those stories can build, right? And I know that affected some of my very close friendships, very much so.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm glad self-talk came up because that's definitely a big part of it. One thing that's helped me with that, and I think if you have a lot of negative self-talk, it's a practice that hasn't ended for me at least. But one thing that's been helpful for me was every time, first you have to notice when you're doing it, like Amy was saying, but then once I would notice it, I would ask myself, am I saying it or did somebody else tell me that? So like for me personally, I had somebody in my life when I was young who always told me bad things about myself. So I've like internalized those, but I think there's also like media influences and things you see, you know, in commercials and subliminal things as well. So for me, when I catch myself saying something negative about myself, I always try to say like, who's actually saying that? And then that helps me, like, if, you know, I'm like, oh, well, this person told me this about myself. And I'm like, oh, well, what does that person know about me? And then that, like, has given myself the power to, like, disagree with that perception or, you know. So that's just one thing that's helped me with that. And then I was going to say about, like acts of self-love. Once I got to the point where I could like identify the self-talk and make it more a positive dialogue with myself, I feel like being, it's not one thing in particular for self-love for me personally, but it's just in every instance that I'm in, I just try to be really honest with myself. Because I feel like that's one thing, because I've been self-deprecating for most of my life, I was just so used to falling back into like what makes everybody else comfortable, like what can I do where it like doesn't cause conflict. Like I've always been this like passive participant in my own life, and now I'm more you know, day to day, like every day I try to ask myself like, what do I need? Do I need to rest, or do I need to like get energized? Do I need, and we're yeah, I also go to therapy, and there's sometimes when there's this like really deep rooted thing that is heavy and I need to dive into it, and self-love is work and it hurts and it's hard to do and I need to do that work. But then right, there's also the times where I'm like, today I can't do that. Like today I need to just like watch TV and zone out and like have a heating pad on and not text anybody and just like be alone, you know? So like I just try to, for me, there's not like one single thing I do for self-care, but I try to think about like how to do everything lovingly for myself. And that's really helped me with like, yeah, I think somebody said setting boundaries at some point, and like that is a struggle for me that I am like diving deep into. I follow all these accounts on Instagram that are all about boundaries. So every time I go on Instagram, it's like a reminder, like, okay, boundaries are okay. It's not selfish. It's just taking care of yourself. So.
I love that. And if, Lori, if you have any favorite boundaries accounts, if you don't mind popping those in the chat, I'd love, like, if there are certain accounts that you guys really like to follow that help with self-love, because I know we tend to fill our feed by following hashtags around endo and things like that. And sometimes we need a break from that and need to also fill up some of our feed with some of these things. So I would love it if you guys would share some of your favorites in the chat. And we can post those in the comments later when the recording's posted too.
I just want to say we have about 10 minutes remaining. We're going to end at 1:05, being we started a little late. So just wanted to, you know, just make sure you guys knew that, and, you know, to ask any questions or Rosemarie, talk about anything else you want to make sure that we all know about self-love.
Great. Do any of you guys have any questions so far, or just something that you really wanted brought up today?
I just want to reiterate on the boundaries. I know we've really talked about it, but I feel like so many times I just say yes to things, and I say yes to things because I feel good at the time. But then I have to remember that sometimes my body does not cooperate on the day that I have to do those things. And that's okay. And it's very hard to make sure that I'm knowing that that is okay. Does that make sense? I know it's a little confusing, but.
And I think a really important act of self-love, something that Melissa, you know, we've talked about, and that's really hard for a lot of us, is asking for help. So when you know, commit to those things and you have to set boundaries later on, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, I can't do this right now. I need you to do it for me, or I need you to help me with this. And that's something that a lot of us struggle with. Like, I know everyone at the foundation, we are very motivated, very driven. We have some really creative people with great ideas, and we all want to just do everything.
Overly ambitious.
We are overly ambitious. And I reached a point, I think last week, where I said, I have as much on my plate as I can handle right now. I can't accept any more responsibilities until I get through my list. And so that setting that boundary for me, I think, was a really important act of self-love. Because yeah, that's something that I definitely struggle with, the boundaries and the asking for help.
I want to kind of add to that too. That brought up, it reminded me that I've been kind of doing some acts of self-love and not really realizing it. So you guys know that I am a nurse, or at least most of you do. But I work in an oncology clinic setting, and whenever a nurse is out, we have to cover each other and cover the clinics of the physicians they work with. And all of our physicians are very busy. So there is one nurse that happens to ask me very often to cover, and lately I have just found it in myself to finally say no. I've had a hard time saying no, because I know we all kind of need those breaks, but I currently am going through a lot of like mobility issues and more pain, not related to endo. And so I finally was like, I need to figure out what's going on with me before I can commit to covering for you. And since then, she's kind of stopped asking me as much, which is beneficial. But thanks for reminding me of that.
I love all of these recommendations, because it got my brain going as far as like, what are some things that I can add in to my day to day without overwhelming? Because I think sometimes we also, because we've got so many aspects of our wellness team and so many doctor's appointments and so many, you know, just that, you know, you don't want it to make it a chore. But it really gave me some ideas of some other ways that I can incorporate self-love into my daily practice. So thank you, all of you, for your recommendations. I did prepare just a few quick points that we can close out with. So just some of it's reiterating a lot of what we already talked about. So when I pulled together just some elements of what self-love is. So part of that is just knowing you are enough. And it's a lot of what we've talked about today, where Nancy brought up meeting yourself where you're at, because where you're at is enough. And it's so hard to believe that sometimes, especially when it's a bad pain day and just like everything in the world is happening at once. But just knowing that you are enough as is a crucial piece of self-love. Embracing that imperfection, because no human is perfect. They may look it on social media, but they sure as heck are not perfect. So I am proudly imperfect. I will screw up every single day, and I love that about myself. And sometimes I have to say that to myself in order to believe it, right? But that's part of it. Vulnerability, really chipping away at that armor. And I think that's actually a really crucial piece too. And we talked about in the self-compassion session a few months ago. It's a big piece to actually being able to ask for support. Is you have to remove a little bit of that armor in order to ask for support and be vulnerable enough to be able to get the support that you need. You know, really just living in your authenticity, living in your truth, That is an act of self-love, because the more that you live in your truth, the more that you understand what you need. And the more that you understand that you're missing, about yourself or what you're missing from others as well. Gratitude, I think, is a really important aspect. And there are some days that is dang hard. And there are other days that it's really easy, but making sure that it's a piece of our life, that is a really crucial part of self-love. And just knowing that it's a practice. Like, this is something that it's showing up for yourself every single day, even on the crappy ones. And if you can't do it for yourself, pull someone in to help you. Look at all of the warriors that we've got in this room right now, that we can all lean on each other. That's an incredible thing. Like, that is such a gift that Endo Foundation of Houston has given this community. So use it and abuse it. Like, that's what we're here for, right? So lean into us when those days that you can't show up for yourself. We'll show up for each other. Sometimes we'll show up for each other when we can't show up for ourselves. So, it's kind of a weird thing, isn't it? But those are some really important elements of self-love. Now, Amy brought up a really great point earlier of, what if you can't even really imagine self-love? Well, the first thing I always recommend is to look at self-like first. If self-love is so far away, like, don't kill yourself over it, right? Because sometimes it can be so intimidating, so all-consuming. Like, so start with self-like. What are they can be some of the tiniest little things, but what are little things that you can self-like into self-love? It's just starting with those little pieces and adding to those. Put those on cards, place them in a box, like, keep adding to that box things that you find throughout the day. If you're a visual person, or put notes on your phone of something that you realize that you like about yourself. Like, oh, I didn't even think about this. Start, add it to the list. And really explore what self-love means to you. Hopefully through this session, you got some ideas from fellow warriors, but really take a moment to really sit down and explore, what does self-love mean to me? And, you can use journaling, you can use, if you're an artist, you can draw or paint or any of that. If it's music, if it's meditation, if it's just sitting down with a warm cup of tea and just taking that 5 minutes while the water boils to actually just lean into what is self-love. But just take that time, even if it's tiny. And then the last thing, is affirmations, and not in the like toxic positivity aspect of affirmations, but things that you really believe, or are so close to believing. Sometimes those can be really helpful too, where you're like, I know I'm on the verge of this, but I don't fully believe it, but I'm so close to being there. And so in order to create a good affirmation, it needs to be in the current state. So you already believe it, you already, like, that's how you write it. And it is positive, but it can also have elements of what it needs to have elements of what you're experiencing and where you're at. And so, like, I am enough is an affirmation. I wrote another one down that's, I nurture all of me, my whole self, which includes what's wounded and what's healing. So it's acknowledging that aspect as well. That with resilience must come tenderness or forgiveness. I give myself permission to feel. Like, those are some examples of an affirmation. And what can be a really helpful practice is to choose one affirmation a week, or even one affirmation a month. If there's one you just really want to lean into, as an act of self-love, then, choose just one to focus on, and and collect them. Because over time, you're going to start looking back at those and like, wow, I can't believe I didn't believe this at once, right? And then there's going to be others like, oh, I need to revisit that one because I think that's an area I need to grow back in again. So, so those are just some suggestions. But I just wanted to close out real quick with, I want to go around the room. And if first word that comes to your mind just from this session. Go.
Hair.
Positive.
Acceptance.
Self-like.
Acceptance of where we are.
Attitude. Forgiveness.
And I say grateful for everyone for sharing.
Helpful.
Appreciative. Encouraged.
And there's one in the chat box, worthiness. I love that. Anyone that we missed? Enough? Is that what you said?
Oh, another one in the chat box, community. I like that.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for spending a whole hour with all these beautiful warriors. And I put my Instagram account on the chat box. It's Rosemarie P. Coach. I do have a community for warriors, and it's pay what you can. It's not, and I am a professional certified coach. So what I do is I incorporate group coaching. I am adding a community aspect as far as I'm adding some chat boards. So we have monthly group sessions, and that way afterwards you can continue the conversation with each other. So that's about to launch. We do have 2 sessions this month. One is going to be a restorative yoga session for warriors, and that will be an hour long with a dear friend and instructor in Houston, Brittany Pires, who has helped me quite a bit in my journey with chronic illness and with endo. And then the other one is going to be with Adele Bridges, and she's a certified yoga instructor, also certified in Z Health, which is a lot of neuroscience around pain. And so she's going to do a very short session. It's just going to be 45 minutes, including Q&A, but it's going to be around meditation for pain. So if any of those sessions interest you, just hop on my Instagram, and it's the first link in the profile, and it'll direct you to that community. And I also do the daily prompts that are on Instagram. I do those in Patreon as well, because I recognize some people don't want to be on social media. So I wanted to make sure there was another space that's safe for you to go to, and you'll get an email with the prompt. And then I always add coaching reflective questions at the end of those, which I don't do on Instagram. So just want to make you aware of that. All are welcome. And I hope to see your faces there, but I hope to, if you ever have questions or get stuck, feel free to just reach out, message me, and we can chat. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you guys so much, all of you, for joining us. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Rosemarie, for sharing your insight with us and your wisdom. We really appreciate it. Nancy, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate you so much. And
Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. And thank everyone who came and who shared, even if you were uncomfortable sharing. It's really great to see such great things in our community. And, please find us, Endometriosis Foundation of Houston area endometriosis group. And I appreciate you guys spending your Saturday with us. Anything anybody else wants to add?
Thank you.
Definitely stay tuned. We've got a very special guest for Endometriosis Awareness Month, March 20th. So definitely keep an eye out for that announcement. And also, as a heads up, as you know, we're based here in Houston, Texas. We have a very beloved endometriosis surgeon by the name of Dr. Guan. And we will be having a fundraiser which is an endometriosis, that I have a sweatshirt on. So we will be having this as a fundraiser for Endo Awareness Month. So we hope that you will, join us in celebrating, and we'll have some more special announcements coming up. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Happy Saturday.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be with you.
Bye.
You.